I'm going to play a mage and stack nothing but haste. No crit, no mastery, everything else is gone. By the end of this video, you will know if this is broken or completely useless. Let's find out. Not long ago, I tested a full mastery mage. The idea was simple. Can you one-shot a full health target by stacking mastery alone? And the result was pretty insane. With a 12,700 empowered arcane barrage, it was actually possible to delete a full HP target in single hit. This time, I'm doing the exact opposite. Instead of one massive hit, I'm stacking full haste to see if I can melt targets with spells raining down like a storm. For today's experiment, I prepared a human mage. Race doesn't matter that much, but there is a reason I went for human. First, the human spirit gives a small bonus to haste, and more importantly, will to survive lets me replace the PvP trinket, which means I can run 2 haste trinkets at the same time. Now you might be wondering, then what about CC that isn't a stun? Well, let's just pray the healer is paying attention. I'll break down the full gear setup a little later. For now, this is where my stats are at. In this state, my mage is sitting at around 57% haste, and with self buffs like Icy Veins and Time Warp, I can push that all the way up to 30% haste. At this speed, Blizzard lasts about 5.7 seconds and ticks 16 times, and Frozen Orb lasts 12 seconds and ticks a total of 24 times. To make a proper comparison, I brought back my full mastery Orc Mage again. This character is sitting at just 6% haste. Frozen Orb behaves exactly the same. It still lasts 12 seconds and ticks 24 times. So surprisingly, Frozen Orb is not affected by haste at all. Blizzard, however, tells a very different story. On the full mastery mage, Blizzard lasts 14 seconds and ticks 14 times. That means the number of ticks stays roughly the same, but the duration is more than twice as long compared to the high haste setup. In other words, with high haste, you are not getting more ticks, you are dealing the same damage but in much shorter window. And if you are wondering why this synergy works so well, the answer is right here, in the talents. The ice color says, each time Blizzard deals damage, the cooldown of Frozen Orb is reduced by 0.5 seconds. Which means the faster Blizzard ticks, the more value you get. And as you probably already know, Blizzard and Frozen Orb have incredible synergy. When you cast Frozen Orb, your next Blizzard is empowered by 60%. That empowered Blizzard then ticks faster, reduces the cooldown of Frozen Orb, and lets you cast it again even sooner. So you end up in a loop. Frozen Orb empowers Blizzard, and Blizzard shortens Frozen Orb, and high haste keeps the entire cycle moving faster and faster. And this is where the setup really shines. The biggest advantage is that everything here is pure AoE damage. Outside of arena matches or single target boss fights, you are usually dealing with multiple enemies, especially in dungeons and sometimes even in battlegrounds. And both Blizzard and Frozen Orb are AoE spells. When you're fighting groups, their synergy becomes incredibly powerful. You just keep raining spells down on everything around you over and over again, and it feels incredibly satisfying. This haste setup also works extremely well in another major solo activity in World of Warcraft War Within, the Delves. As you know, Delves are designed for solo adventures. Classes with strong self-healing, tank pets, or permanent stealths tend to perform better there. Mages, on the other hand, usually struggle. no self-heal, no pet to tank, and very little room for mistakes. That's where Haste changes everything. With a high Haste setup, enemies barely get a chance to touch you, as long as you place Blizzard and Frozen Orb properly. Enemies get locked in place, buried under constant slow and damage, and simply die in the snowstorm. The result is a much smoother, safer solo experience, letting you explore delves comfortably alongside Bran without ever feeling overwhelmed. There's another major advantage to stacking Haste, and it's the way it reduces the global cooldown, making your rotation feel much smoother. In World of Warcraft, there's something called the global cooldown. It's the short lockout that happens after you use an ability, preventing you from casting another spell immediately. What's interesting is that while this isn't clearly stated in the Haste tooltip, Haste actually reduces the global cooldown as well. To make this easier to see, I installed the global cooldown bar using the weak aura and compared it directly with the full mastery mage. With higher haste, it's not just the casting time that gets shorter, the downtime between spells gets shorter too. As a result, the entire rotation becomes much faster and more fluid. Of course, this comes with trade-off. The upside is a faster, more responsive rotation and much higher action density. The downside is higher input pressure and increased fatigue during longer fights. There is also the issue of diminishing returns. As you stack more and more haste, each additional point gives you less value than the one before it, and when that happens, you are technically stacking more stats, but you might end up not using your stats to its full potential. But what if we take this idea in a completely different direction? Instead of building everything around Frozen Orb and Blizzard, what if we go all in on Frostfire Bolt, the most basic but also the core spell of a Frost Mage? There are actually quite a few talents that directly empower the Frostfire Bolt. Talents like Brain Freeze, Frozen Touch, and Deep Shatter significantly increase its damage and proc value. And if you want to adapt Frostfire Bolt for multi-target situations, talents like Fracture's Frost and Death's Chill allow Frostfire Bolt based gameplay to scale beyond single target. On top of that, in PvP talents, the Ice Form can boost Frostfire Bolt damage by an additional 30% every minute, turning it into a powerful burst window. And if you go down the Frostfire path, Frostfire Bolt's casting time is reduced by another 10%, letting you fire it off at almost lightning speed. There is also an interesting indirect synergy worth mentioning. The Cold Front doesn't buff Frostfire Bolt damage directly, but after casting Frostfire Bolt 15 times on an enemy player, it automatically summons a Frozen Orb, which means even in a Frostfire Bolt focus setup, Orb can naturally loop back into the rotation. In actual gameplay, this is where Frostfire Bolt focus setup really shines. You don't have to worry about complex spell rotations. With just Frostfire Bolt, you can comfortably handle single target damage, AoE pressure, and consistent slows. That level of versatility from a single spell is a huge advantage. In chaotic situations, having a simple damage cycle is especially valuable. Fewer decisions, fewer mistakes, and more room to focus on positioning and survival. The downside, however, is clear. Compared to Blizzard and Frozen Orb, the overall damage output is lower. That said, I wouldn't recommend this setup for PvE. The main reason is how the mechanics work differently compared to PvP. In PvE, you need to cast Frostfire Bolt 30 times before the Frozen Orb is summoned. For me, that requirement feels too restrictive and too slow to be practical in real PvE scenarios. On top of that, the Ice Form is a PvP talent, which means it doesn't apply in PvE at all. And honestly, there's another issue. You're just pressing Frostfire Bolt over and over again. Without managing any real synergies or decision making, the gameplay starts to feel sleepy. There is no real rhythm to manage, no satisfying interaction between spells, just repetition. Without Ice Form's damage boost, and with much slower orb trigger, the Frostfire Bolt focus setup loses a lot of its appeal in PvE. So while it can be fun and effective in PvP, it's not something I would recommend for PvE content. The setup itself is actually very simple. For the most part, I'm using the standard Conquest gears, and for any slot that doesn't naturally offer haste, like boots, I just use crafted gear instead. For the cloak, I'm using the legendary cloak available in the World Within. One important detail though, you need to choose the crafted fiber version, not the one you buy directly from the vendor. Surprisingly, a lot of players miss this step, and yes, I'll be honest, I was one of them too. I've left the talent code in the video description below. Feel free to try them out, tweak them, and use whichever version fits your playstyle best. So the big question is, will this setup still be relevant in the next expansion, the Midnight? To be clear, this part has to be taken cautiously, since the expansion isn't live yet. Like many other classes, Frost Mage is seeing some major talent changes. From what we can see so far, Frozen Orb still empowers Blizzard, but Blizzard no longer reduces the cooldown of Frozen Orb. Instead, the cooldown reduction has been shifted to Ice Lance. That tells us a lot about Blizzard's design direction. It looks like the intention going forward is to push Frost Mages toward the rotation that mixes Frozen Orb and Ice Lance, rather than relying on Blizzard to drive the entire loop. Whether that ends up being better or worse is something we will only know once Midnight goes live. And when it does, I'll definitely revisit this and test it again.